In the streets of Soweto, there's a name few dare to say. A man trained to kill by a government that later disowned him. Some call him a ghost. Others just fear him. Long before the streets of Soweto were ruled by gangsters, they were navigated by shadows. During apartheid, the African National Congress needed more than speeches. They needed soldiers, quiet, lethal, invisible soldiers. These were underground, operatives, trained in exile, deployed in silence, masters of sabotage, surveillance, and assassination. They were the hidden hand behind South Africa's liberation. But when the dust settled, many were abandoned, forgotten, and some, like the man you're about to meet, never stopped fighting. Patrick "Slim" Mlambo, a former ANC underground operative turned feared enforcer in Soweto's underworld, remains one of the most elusive and enigmatic figures in South African crime history. His name is barely mentioned in public discourse today, yet between 1997 and 2012, he was linked to over 30 unsolved killings, hijackings, and political intimidation jobs. Slim moved like a ghost, operating in the space where politics, organized crime, and police corruption merged. They called him Slim, not because of his figure, but because he slipped through fingers like air. A ghost. A shadow in the alleyways of Soweto. For over a decade, Patrick "Slim" Mlambo was the man you called when you wanted someone gone. Quietly. Permanently. He was a liberation fighter once, a trained sniper, a political believer. But when the war ended, Slim didn't come home like the others. He turned his skills inward, into the townships, into the night. Born in 1969 in Meadowlands, Soweto, Patrick Mlambo was recruited into Umkhonto we Sizwe at just 17. Sent to Angola, then trained in Cuba, he was a top marksman by 20. But the transition to peacetime South Africa wasn't easy for everyone, especially not for those like Slim, men trained to kill, who returned home to nothing. When the ANC failed to reintegrate many fighters into society, Slim joined a growing group of forgotten war veterans, and he found work where his skills still held value: protection, extortion, assassination. In the early 2000s, Johannesburg was in flames. The taxi wars were claiming dozens of lives every month.
Are cooperating with their Johannesburg police counterparts to hunt down those behind the apprehension of the killing of 11 taxi operators from the Johannesburg area in the KZN Midlands. SABC News reporter Mlungisi Kumalo has the latest on that. A very good afternoon to you. Over 200 bullets were fired in this. Can you please give us an update?
Well, yeah. What I can tell you is, Chantal, we've just gotten more information from the police. In fact, they said that the victims that had died, the 11 victims rather that have just died, were making their way to Johannesburg. In fact, these victims are part of the Ivory Park Taxi Association, which is in Gauteng. Now, what I can tell you right now is that yesterday these victims were making their way into the funeral of their taxi owner, who was apparently said to have been gunned down in Johannesburg. And now, after the funeral, they made their way home. At around midnight yesterday, they were ambushed by unknown gunmen execution style.
Slim was working as a fixer for the Top 6 Taxi Association, offering more than just protection. He offered clean professional removals of rival leaders. He was the man behind the man, often hired by syndicates who never wanted their names mentioned. The Top 6 Taxi Association wasn't just a transport body. It was one of Gauteng's most powerful and feared taxi organizations, operating vast routes from Soweto into the Johannesburg CBD and even parts of the East Rand. But behind the steering wheels was a much darker empire. The association was allegedly linked to gun trafficking, protection rackets, and illicit debt collection rings that terrorized rank managers and drivers alike. Internal leadership disputes often ended not in meetings, but in morgues. And that's where men like Slim came in. Operatives with no official ties, no visible records, and no fingerprints. His reputation grew. No one ever saw him coming. No one ever found the weapon, and no one ever dared mention his name in public. In 2006, a list leaked from inside a Johannesburg Metro Police task team. It contained 12 names, all alleged underworld targets linked to racketeering, bribery, and assassination plots. At the very bottom, scratched in small handwriting, PM. Last resort, PM. Patrick Mlambo. It confirmed what everyone feared. Slim was not just a trigger man, he was an asset, maybe even protected. Insiders believed he was used by rogue cops, politicians, and even private intelligence units to carry out unsanctioned eliminations. But in 2012, the myth of invincibility crumbled. A car ambush near Diepkloof left 3 men dead. Among them, a rising Soweto drug lord and 2 Nigerian nationals. Rumor was Slim was hired to take them out. But this time, he was spotted. A witness described a tall man with dreadlocks, walking calmly with a silenced pistol, then disappearing into a silver quantum. The description matched Slim. The next day, SAPS raided a warehouse in Selby, but Slim was already gone. From that day on, no one ever saw him again. Not in Soweto, not in Durban, not in Zimbabwe. Not even Interpol lists his name. Some say he was executed by a rogue police unit. Others say he was offered a new identity in exchange for dirt on high-level officials. A former crime intelligence operative claimed Slim was last seen boarding a flight to Mozambique under a fake passport, with help from a top-ranking police general. The real conspiracy? Some believe Slim was a state asset from the beginning, a tool used to silence whistleblowers, rivals, and political enemies. And when he became a liability, they made him disappear. To this day, the name Patrick Slim Mlambo is spoken in hushed tones in Soweto. His face isn't in the newspapers. No mugshots, no trial, no grave. Yet his legend continues, passed from one generation of gangsters to the next. He became a ghost story, a man made by war, shaped by chaos, used by power, and erased by fear. He wasn't the most powerful gangster or the richest, but he was the most feared. And in the underworld, that's all that matters.